afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming back to another episode of our podcast, A While Back. Today is going to be a very unique episode. Today, we have no format whatsoever, no predetermined questions whatsoever, but Grandpa has made it clear that he wants to talk about two subjects in particular. So he's going to go on and lead off the conversation, and we're going to see where it goes from there. I'll be asking questions periodically, but he wants to do a lot of the talking. I guess there's quite a few memories he has that he's brought up, and it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. But today, the episode is titled Cornbread and Molasses. And with that, Grandpa, we're on to you.
Okie dokie. We're going back to the days of the cornbread and molasses, and that's what my daddy loved to eat. And during the cornbread and molasses days, is what we did was we went ahead and took shelled corn in a sheller, and then what we did is we took the best ears for your cornmeal, and we went ahead and shelled the corn. And then what we did after we shelled the corn, we went ahead and took this best corn ears that we possibly could, and we had let them blow through the wind and blow the weevils out of them. Because Daddy was real particular about the corn weevils. And those things were just like real small. You could barely see them, but he was real particular about getting all the weevils out of the corn. So what we did is you take a bucket of corn and you just let it blow down. You just let it run down with the wind blowing, and it would blow all the empty corn kernels and weevils out. And then to make sure that we got all them weevils out of there, Daddy would still take that corn and he'd put it on a table to make sure that none of those weevils were in that corn. And so we'd go through the corn kernels. And then what you did, we had a grinder. And the grinder worked for chickens, hogs, and also for cornmeal. What it did, it had a setting screw on it. And you could set it where you cracked the corn either in halves or maybe thirds or fourths. But then you could also have it ground real fine like a cornmeal. And so when you wanted to grind the cornmeal, that's the way you'd set it, real tight. And you'd grind that corn and you grind it into a cornmeal. And then that's the way we made our cornmeal. And so Mom would make the cornbread, and then Daddy just loved cornbread and bacon or hog lard or whatever. That was his favorite meal. I didn't care for it as much. I was more of a bread and potato man. And I think Mama was too, and some of the siblings, but Daddy just loved that cornbread. But anyway, after that, going back now, we also had like 3 doctors in Shiner, 2 medical doctors and 1 not a medical doctor. And so the medical doctors were a Dr. Frank Wagner and a Dr. Boyle. And Dr. Boyle was the one that delivered me. And but they were both excellent medical doctors. Now, when I say we didn't have a medical doctor, I'm talking about Dr. Speck. And if you know what Speck means, Speck in Czech means bacon. And so what we had this bacon rind that we kept in a salt box. And anytime anybody would step on a rusty nail or get cut by anything that was rusty, the first thing you ran to get was Dr. Speck. You got Dr. Speck out of the salt box and you put him over the nail where you stepped on the nail or the wire, rusty wire, cut your arm or whatever. You'd put Dr. Speck on there. And boy, did he suck that poison out, which was an infection we call today was an infection. But he sucked that right out of there. And by day or 2 days later, you were ready to go. But that was one of the home remedies we had. But Dr. Speck wasn't used just for like rusted cuts or nails that you step on, rusted boards or stuff. He was also used for other purposes, like maybe a coal. If you had a coal, you'd put it around your neck, under your neck and stuff, and it seemed to just suck that coal out of there too. And so that was our 3 doctors. But our main doctor was Dr. Speck, and then the other 2 doctors we always went to when we needed them after that. But yes, and then another thing that we did on the farm was a lot of times we had
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions real quick about the doctors. So when you were talking about 3 doctors,
Yes.
I honestly believe that you were talking about 3 professional doctors.
Right.
But you were talking about Dr. Wagner and Dr. Boyle as
Right.
being the 2 doctors in
medical
town.
doctors.
And Dr. Speck was your box of bacon, and this was raw bacon that y'all kept?
No, what it was a bacon, raw bacon rind. It had about that much fat on it.
Okay.
So it had about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of fat on it.
So if you stepped on a rusty nail or anything of that nature, those kind of things, or you got stuck with something,
Right.
that's what you would lay over the puncture with.
Right.
Okay.
You lay it over and wrap it around there, and that's the way it would.
So it would
really
literally just go on and suck out any kind of poison or toxin that was in there?
That's what.
Really? So there was no tetanus shot, nothing like that, right?
No.
Wow, okay. But those
Tetanus-
home remedies, you never hear anything about like that.
Yeah, you don't hear about the.
No,
home
you don't hear
remedies
something like
nowadays.
that at all. That's crazy.
And I think the reason you don't hear, about them nowadays anymore is because they don't work like they used to.
Right.
I remember when we got married, I remember stepping on a rusted nail in a board, and I told my wife, I said, hey, we got any bacon in the ice box? And she said, yeah. She said, what are you going to do with it? I said, well, I'm going to wrap it around my foot. I stepped on a rusted nail. She said, what? And my wife, she didn't believe in that. She
No, she didn't.
believed in
She was a nurse, remember?
Right, she's a nurse.
She didn't believe in that.
And she said, what are you talking about? I said, well, look, I said, I know when I was back home, I said, if that bacon, if we stepped on a rusted nail or got cut by a rusted wire, I said, all we'd had to do was put that bacon rind and let's suck it right out. And so she said, I don't think that's going to work. I said, oh, okay. I said, but I don't care if it's going to work or not. Just give me the bacon. So she went ahead and gave me 2 or 3 of the bacon deals. I put those things, wrapped them around my finger, around my foot. And the next morning I woke up, it was even worse. So she took me. She said, "Oh no!" She said, "You're going
that
to the
would be
doctor."
the outcome I would expect.
She
That
said,
it'd be
"You're
even worse.
going to the doctor and you're going to get a tetanus shot." And you know what? 52 years later, I'm still waiting for that poison to come out of that foot with that bacon rind. But no, talking about the old remedies, I think the reason they worked so much different at those days were that the air was a lot different, and you didn't have, the feed was so much different. You didn't have all these the
steroids, the
and
antibiotics,
all
all the
that
stuff
going
that's
into the
added
feed.
into cattle and
Right.
pork now. Right, exactly.
You fed them mostly corn.
That's correct. Right.
And
Absolutely.
maize, and that was
Right.
the thing.
Absolutely.
So I think that was the
Well,
big difference.
one of the other things that you
Anybody.
mentioned when you first started talking about processing the corn
Uh-huh.
was the corn sheller. So if I remember correctly,
Uh-huh.
in Grandpa's big barn, and this was when we were real little,
Right.
there was the corn sheller in there, and you would literally turn it by hand.
By hand. Right.
And you would put in the whole stalk of corn,
Mhm.
cob of corn, put it in there. By the time it was through, you could hear it shredding through. the cob would come out at the very bottom, and all the corn would come into a bucket underneath.
Right.
So that's the sheller you were talking about?
No, that's not the sheller I was
What was
talking
that?
about. I was talking about the sheller where you put one ear at a time and you just held it down. And I'm telling you, a lot of times after shelling maybe a 5-gallon bucket or more, I had blisters on the top of my hand from holding the corn ear down, trying to push it down into the sheller.
Okay.
Because it would take one ear at the time. But now, when you're talking about the corn sheller you're talking about,
that was for feed.
That was right. That was from a Chevrolet to a Cadillac style.
Okay.
You went that one. The one you're talking about, you had the big iron wheel.
Mm-hmm.
You get this thing moving
That's
wide open, and you could keep putting in ears of corn, and you probably could shell maybe 10 to 15 ears of corn
it was
at one
fast.
time.
Absolutely.
It was fast.
Yes.
And so it didn't take very long to shell that corn that way.
No.
But but first.
So the one you're talking about was when you were much younger, and it was manual.
Right.
Okay.
Manual, all manual. And
yeah, because that's the only the shell, the corn sheller I remember was that one in the barn.
Right.
But of course, that was already past
exactly
the one you had to endure. Okay, good.
Now, later on, we got a hammer mill also with belt pulley. We had an old John Deere B, and you put a belt pulley on it.
Right.
And you
crank it up,
feed it in the hammer mill.
Okay.
And that was really, but not with that, you could grind corn. You didn't need to shuck the corn or anything. You could just grind the corn, or you could put hay in there and grind whatever you wanted and make any type of feed you wanted.
Wow, good.
And then if you wanted to add, molasses, but you also had like maize and stuff that you could grind real fine.
Right.
And if you wanted to add any kind of like molasses and stuff, you could, because it was more or less like a real feed mill.
Yeah. Because that's what you were using to feed the cows, to feed the hogs. So that would make more sense. And I can understand the molasses just to get them to enjoy eating it.
Right.
So that's what the molasses portion of it was for.
Exactly.
Right? Okay,
to give it the flavor. Exactly.
All right, good.
That's
so
what it was.
did Grandpa add any kind of other products to that? Like any type of protein, extra protein, any other type of feed, any other type of vegetation, beans or anything to that?
Well,
when he was doing it?
I mean, you could grind just about anything. If you had any like peas,
right,
hay
that's what
or anything, purple hull, peas, hay, or whatever you had, you could grind it straight through there. And it worked fast. That was fast. I mean, you could grind a 50-pound sack in probably 5 minutes, 2-3 minutes. It didn't take very long, because that thing just shelled it.
Yeah, so knowing Grandpa, he was probably adding peas for protein to that feed mix as well.
And what you did, you just changed the screens in there. If you wanted a smaller grind, you had like 3 or 4 different screens that you would change in there. If you wanted something real fine, you put a smaller whole screen. And if you wanted something bigger, you just put the bigger whole screen.
Right. Exactly. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, I know I've never seen that, but I do remember that. I do remember that corn sheller in the barn.
Corn sheller, yeah.
So Grandpa was adding extra protein and things of that nature at the time, which I'm pretty confident was. That just means that, basically they knew even long ago, the more protein you add, the faster the cattle put on weight. Or the hogs put on weight too.
Oh, exactly.
With that added protein.
Exactly.
So that was just brilliant on their part at the time. And these were just farmers.
Right.
There was nothing to it as far as science go other than this is what we're going to do. This is the way we're doing the mixture. And this is what's working best for us. So
what it amazes me so much is these people, and I guess you go all the way back to the Indian settlers, Indians and settlers and whatever, but they had no education. And like the old timers, they had 4th and 5th grade.
Right, up to.
But they were so smart. They knew, and they passed all this down to us.
Right.
Like it's amazing what they came up with, and for the type of education they just had, it's just amazing. It just baffles me to think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Those people were so smart to preserve all their meats, to preserve all this food and stuff, which just I mean, they had nothing, no refrigeration or nothing to be able to do all
Yeah,
that.
exactly. That's right.
And they
Wow.
passed it on down to the generations. Of course, today we have good refrigeration and everything, and it's a lot different today. But
Absolutely. Absolutely.
they were the ones that instituted all this, and that's why I guess I just admire the older
The way of
generation.
doing things, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
you brought up the cornbread and how Grandpa loved cornbread, and
Right.
you said bacon with his
exactly.
cornbread
Oh
too.
yeah, he loved bacon. That's
So
one
did he
thing.
like to have syrup, molasses, anything of that sort on his
Oh,
cornbread?
He loved his cornbread and syrup and molasses.
Mm-hmm.
And he put that hog lord on there as thick as he could get it. And the man lived to be 89 years old.
Exactly.
And I don't know what his cholesterol level was. But
I don't think it mattered.
I don't think it mattered.
Because, he had such a powerful heart for
Yeah,
working so
yeah.
hard and all the
Yeah.
exercise that he was getting.
Right.
Even if he had cut it off, there was no way he was going to die at an early age. He was working nonstop.
That's true.
Right.
And another thing that he did too, he made sausage, and I forgot to bring this up a while back, but I don't know if you knew it. But at one time, his sausage was so good and so famous, he went ahead and he sold it.
No, I didn't know he was sold.
In fact, he started selling it to the stores. I think he sold it to 2 stores there in Shiner.
Macker's?
Well, I don't know which one. Well, it was Potex, I think, and Macros.
Oh,
I think
okay.
both of those.
All right.
And the way he started with that was like with 60 pounds. I think he started with 60 pounds. I don't think he knew what he was getting himself into. So he said, "Oh man, I'm going to make some good money on this sausage, Mom." And I forgot what he was selling it for at that time. I think it was 80 or 90 cents a pound. And oh man, that was big money.
Well, I was going to say at that time that had to be good money.
That was big
right,
money.
that had to be good money.
And
at
so
that time.
I don't know what the stores were selling it for, but he started out with 60 pounds. And this was the funny part. He took it to the stores. He took them to like 2 different stores, and the stores sold out in 2 days.
Oh,
and they said, "Hey, we want 100 pounds."
Exactly.
And after Daddy saw that, he said, "Oh man, this is just too much work. I'm not doing this no more, Mom." But it was funny. But yeah, he made excellent sausage, and I mean, they sold out of that sausage, I think, within 1 or 2 days, and they asked him for double the amount. And at that time we had the hand grinder and stuff, and
Right.
boy, I was so happy that they didn't want any more sausage, because that was a lot of grinding to do with those days.
That is, I did not know that he did sell it.
He did.
I knew he
did
made
sell
incredible sausage because I
it.
love the sausage.
Yeah, he did.
But I had no idea that he had sold it.
Yeah, he tried. He did. He sold it, but he didn't stay in that business too long.
Well, that's one of those things, and you and I had talked about it once before. I don't even know if we were on the podcast when we had talked about it, but we had talked about how when you kill a cat or a hog or a deer, you don't. Most people in today's day and age have no idea how to actually process one. You can feel gutted. It's very simple in most cases, but they don't know how to actually process one.
Mm-hmm.
We're lucky enough that several of the grandkids know how to actually process them now. So they know how to cut them up. They know what's the best choice piece of meat. They know how to grind it into just regular ground meat, and they know how you would go on to make sausage from that point on. So these are kind of unfortunately lost arts that are hopefully coming back, because I've seen a lot of people like the same thing with beers. So now everybody wants to have their own beer, their own label, and they're making all these independent brews. Well, I've also started seeing that sausages and ground meat, people are starting to have their own kind of names attached to them, and they're making very specific flavors. So it's great that you brought that up, because that's exactly what that makes me think of now.
Right.
Is people are actually trying to get back to doing those kinds of lost arts, like processing, that, just 10 years ago, no. If I'm going to go get sausage, I'm going to go to the supermarket. If I'm going to have that deer butchered, I'm going to have it butchered over at some other butchering company that's going to take care of it, or some grocery store. Now, people are starting to go back to the old way of doing it. And I think it's actually one of those things that's kind of turning things around.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the sausage part because I had no idea about Grandpa selling it.
Oh, yeah. And another thing is, what I want to mention is when I was, when we went hunting, you bought 22 shells for 39 cents a box.
Wow.
And when you went hunting, you didn't go out there just to shoot shells at a target practice or something.
Right.
You went out there to kill birds. And I remember I killed many a dove with a 22.
Right.
That we, and if you had to kill about five to six good dove to at least make a stew or something out of them.
Right.
But when you shoot those doves with that 22, it usually put a pretty good sized hole in them. But we also used the shotgun. But the shotgun shells were like $1.50.
They were much more
box.
expensive.
They were more expensive.
Right.
But you didn't shoot at one dove on a line or on a ground. You waited and you lined them up you waited till they lined up on a fence.
Right.
And man, when they lined up on that fence, that was the time to shoot them.
That's right.
And I mean, there was times where you'd kill like 8-10 doves on a shot. And so you made every shell count. Not only that, when we went quail hunting also, we shoot the quail, but you wouldn't shoot one quail at a time like we do nowadays. Go out there and have a quail fly up and shoot them one at a time. You always look for the cubby of quail. You look for them under a tree.
Right.
And when you saw that cubby, when you saw that brown spot, you knew that was a cubby of quail. So you'd shoot into that, and sometimes you might kill 13 quail if it was that many. But I've seen as much as 13 on a shot.
Wow.
But usually it was 8 or 9 on a shot.
Wow.
But
you had no choice. You had to get as much
you had to
out
get
of
as much meat out of a shot as you could.
Absolutely. That makes sense.
And so,
wow.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, since you brought up hunting, because that's one of the pastimes that I used to love out here too.
Right.
So was that a hobby that y'all got to do? Was that just for fun at certain times of year? What would y'all do with that? Did Grandpa teach you how to shoot? Did he give you the shotgun? Did he give somebody else the 22? What was it like? Because I never heard him talk about hunting.
Yeah, well, Grandpa, he didn't hunt as much as I and Adolph and the boys did. We did a lot of hunting, but he was a good shot too.
I bet he
did a lot
yeah.
of hunting himself when he was young. Of course, when he was, by the time y'all came along, Grandpa was up in age.
Mm-hmm.
But when he was younger, he did a lot of hunting, and he was a real good shot.
Wow.
And he'd kill them. But at that time, you didn't go out there it wasn't a hobby. This was to survive. This was your food. You went out there to shoot and kill stuff for food. You didn't go out there just to shoot stuff, and maybe let it lay or whatever. You ate that stuff once you shot it. You killed it to eat. You didn't just go out there and shoot stuff.
Well, that was your rule of thumb out here growing up. If you're going to shoot it, you're going to have to eat it.
I prefer, right.
And I never had a taste for dove, but I would shoot them every once in a while, and you would eat them, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But I remember that was one of your rule of thumbs, too. If you're going to shoot it, you're going to go on and eat it.
You got to eat it, yeah.
Same thing at the tank. If you're going to catch it and bring it here and clean it, then you're going to eat it.
Right,
too.
you're going to eat the...
And we ate plenty of catfish out here. Same thing, I guess, at growing up in Shiner at the pond, too, right?
Yeah, and Shiner, though, we had a lot of bass. We had a lot of bass in the tank and white perch.
Oh, that's right. I remember the perch.
And Daddy loved that white perch, man. That was a good-sized perch. It weighed about a pound.
I remember he had big ones, yeah.
And we caught, that's what he put in the tank was the bass and the white perch. And I sort of wish I had that in my pond instead of the catfish because they're so much better to eat.
Yeah.
They eat so much, they taste so much better and everything than the catfish. And but that's what we had in our pond. We had white perch and bass.
Well, he also had some big catfish because I remember when Brendan was young, she pulled out that 7 pound.
Oh yeah, to the end, yeah.
He had some big catfish in there too.
To the end, he had when y'all were already. He went ahead and switched to catfish.
Yeah, I remember that because it was
So-
always fun and outstanding to go see what you were going to pull out of the tank over
Yeah.
there. So, all right, good.
So
So, as far as Grandma would go, how would Grandma deal with making strictly meals for him, and then you guys didn't like the lard on top of cornbread or anything else like that? So, would Grandma just save a certain little percentage for him rather than using it for baking or anything else?
oh no, well this was in general. I mean, Grandma just heated it up, and whoever wanted whatever could eat whatever they wanted.
Right.
But like I say, Daddy, he loved that hog lard and that bacon and cornbread. And I like cornbread, but I'm not crazy about cornbread.
No, I'm not either. I agree.
I mean, I'll eat cornbread. Now, as far as turkey and dressing goes, I gotta have
Yes.
cornbread in that. I love cornbread and turkey and dressing. But other than that, I'll eat cornbread, but I'm not that wild about it.
Absolutely, yeah. And the same thing about cornbread with Grandma Mark. I remember Grandma Mark would make cornbread, and I liked it, but kind of along the same lines as Grandpa because she would put plenty of butter and syrup on it. So
Yeah.
that's the only reason I liked it over there too. So.
Yeah.
All right. So what else did you have? Anything else that you wanted to bring up today that maybe we overlooked real quick?
I think
No?
that's pretty much it.
Okay. So
Okay.
at the ending here, because we're already coming to the very end, Dad has some outstanding news. The good thing is that we're going to be going to a different location over the next few weeks. And Dad has some very big news that I'm going to go on and let him share with everybody. So, Dad, what did you want to let them know?
Okay, well, what I want to say is I'm going to have some of my siblings come on the next couple of weeks, and we're going to film this up in probably Yoakum, Texas, and we're going to have Pauline, Beatrice, Henry, Marianne, and probably Agnes on the show. So I'll have my siblings, and we'll discuss a lot more about how the old times used to be. And
that'll be great because I remember that I don't even remember when one of the last reunions was, but the last Peckar reunion, we had everybody around the table, which was all of you original siblings, and everybody would love to hear a bunch of stories and things of that nature. Well, unfortunately, since we can't get everybody together for a reunion, this might be something where all the cousins, all the grandkids are really going to want to pay attention to these upcoming episodes because of the fact you're probably going to hear a lot from your grandpa and your grandmas that you may not have heard before or had the opportunity this year to hear. So please, by all means, watch the next upcoming episodes. They're going to be very interesting. And I know both Dad and I are really looking forward to those episodes.
yes, we are.
Absolutely. So, Dad, is there anything else that you want to say?
Now, let me tell you something else.